Do not open the door when the moon turns red, unless the creatures outside already know your name. Clara Whitaker had heard that warning every year of her life, whispered by old women at the Raven Hollow grocery store, muttered by farmers locking their barns before sundown, carved into the kind of childhood fear that made even brave people check their windows twice. But on the night the red moon climbed over the pine trees, Clara was alone in her little house at the edge of Red Pine Forest, with a dying fire in the stove, a cracked mug of tea in her hands, and no one left in the world to tell her what to do. The house had belonged to Mrs. Whitaker, the woman who had raised her after she was found as a baby 19 years ago, wrapped in a gray blanket near the old logging road. Mrs. Whitaker used to say the forest had given Clara back because it knew she was worth saving. The town said something different. They called her the Red Moon Orphan. They said children found under cursed skies brought trouble with them, even when they grew up quiet, polite, and careful not to ask for more than they were given. Clara had spent most of her life trying to be harmless. She kept her pale hands busy kneading dough at the bakery, sweeping church steps, carrying groceries for widows who thanked her only when no one was watching. She smiled when people looked through her. She apologized when she had done nothing wrong. And that evening, when Mr. Harlan told her not to come back to the bakery because customers felt uneasy around her, she had simply folded her apron, placed it on the counter, and walked 3 miles home through the cold. Now the wind pressed against the walls like something breathing. The trees beyond her window swayed in long black lines beneath a moon the color of burning copper. Clara tried not to look at it. Everyone in town had shut their doors before dark. She knew because she had passed the houses on her way home and seen the iron latches drawn, the porch lights killed, the curtains sealed tight. Only her house still glowed at the edge of the woods, one small square of amber light against miles of shadow. Then came the sound. Not a howl. Not a growl. A soft scrape against the porch boards. Clara froze, the mug warming her fingers while her heart began to beat too hard. Another scrape followed, gentle and patient, as if someone outside had lifted a hand and knocked with claws instead of knuckles. She told herself it was a branch. She told herself it was the wind. But the wind did not pause between touches. The wind did not wait. Clara set the mug down so carefully it barely made a sound. Her floorboards creaked under her bare feet as she crossed the room. At the door, she stopped with one hand on the latch, feeling cold seep through the wood. Every old warning rose inside her at once. Do not answer. Do not look. Do not let the red moon know you are afraid. But beneath the fear, something stranger stirred, a pull deep in her chest, soft and steady, like a voice she had forgotten before she ever learned to speak. Clara opened the door. The porch lantern flickered in the red light, and the breath left her body. 30 red wolves stood in her yard, silent as statues beneath the moon. They were larger than any wolves she had seen in picture books, their coats deep russet and ember bright at the edges, their golden eyes fixed on her with an almost human stillness. Snow drifted around their paws, though the ground had been bare an hour before. None of them moved closer. None showed their teeth. They only watched her, filling the yard from the fence line to the steps, as if they had crossed forests and rivers for this single moment. Clara's hand tightened on the doorframe. She should have screamed. She should have slammed the door and run to the back room. Instead, she whispered, "Who are you?" The largest wolf stepped forward, its shoulders nearly level with the porch rail. Red moonlight traced the scars along its muzzle like silver thread. Clara held her breath as it lowered its head. Not in hunger. Not in warning. In a bow. Behind it, the other 29 wolves bent one by one until the whole yard seemed to kneel before her. Clara stood barefoot in the doorway, trembling in her worn blue dress, the town's unwanted orphan with no family name that truly belonged to her. And she was the only one in Raven Hollow who did not understand why the wolves had come. For several breaths, Clara could not move. The cold from the open doorway slipped around her ankles, crawled beneath the hem of her worn blue dress, and settled against her skin, but it was not the winter air that made her tremble. It was the silence. 30 wolves should have made the night feel wild, dangerous, impossible to survive, yet the yard had become strangely still, as if the whole forest were holding its breath with her. The largest wolf kept its head lowered, waiting. Clara knew that posture. She had seen it only once before, years ago, when Mrs. Whittaker had taken her to the county fair and a frightened horse had bowed its head into Clara's hands instead of kicking the stable door down. Animals had always looked at Clara differently. Dogs stopped barking when she passed. Stray cats followed her down Main Street. Injured birds let her lift them from the grass and carry them to shoebox nests by the stove. Mrs. Whittaker used to smile and say, "Gentle things recognize gentle hearts." But Raven Hollow had never believed gentleness was a gift. To them, Clara was the child found in the wrong place, on the wrong night, beneath the wrong moon. She remembered being 8 years old, standing outside the schoolhouse while 2 girls whispered that her real parents had probably left her in the woods because even they had been afraid of her. She remembered being 12, carrying a basket of apples through the fall market, when Mrs. Bell snatched her little boy aside and told him not to touch anything Clara touched. She remembered being 16, lighting a candle at church for Mrs. Whittaker's failing lungs, and hearing the pastor pause too long before saying her name, as if blessing her might invite trouble through the stained glass windows. Clara had learned to fold herself smaller with every year. She spoke softly. She worked harder than anyone asked. She never walked through town after sundown. She never mentioned the pale crescent birthmark below her left wrist, the one Mrs. Whittaker always covered with long sleeves before strangers came to the house. But tonight, under the red light spilling across the porch, that hidden mark began to warm. Clara looked down. The skin beneath her sleeve pulsed faintly, not painful, just alive. The largest wolf lifted its head a little, golden eyes locked on her wrist. Behind it, the others remained bowed, their red coats dusted with silver frost. Clara swallowed, her throat tight. "I do not know what you want from me," she whispered. The wolf did not answer, not with sound, but something passed through the air, low and aching, like a memory brushing against the edge of her mind. A cradle rocking beside a fire. A woman singing with tears in her voice. Strong arms placing a baby into another woman's hands. Run before they find her. Clara staggered back, one hand pressed to her chest. The vision vanished as quickly as it had come, leaving only the porch, the wolves, and the moon burning above the trees. From far away, beyond the dark line of town, a church bell began to ring. Once. Twice. Then again and again, frantic and uneven. Lights blinked on across Raven Hollow. Doors opened. Voices rose. Clara turned toward town, dread spreading through her stomach. The wolves had come quietly, but the people who feared them would not. The bell kept ringing until every nerve in Clara's body seemed to ring with it. Across the dark stretch of road, lanterns swung in hurried hands, small yellow lights bobbing between the houses of Raven Hollow like frightened fireflies. Voices carried through the cold air, sharp with panic and old suspicion. Clara heard her own name before she saw the first face. "There she is," someone called from beyond the fence. "Standing with them." The word struck harder than the winter wind. The largest wolf turned its head toward the road, but it did not growl. None of them did. The 30 red wolves remained still, their bodies forming a quiet wall between Clara and the approaching townspeople, as if they understood the danger was not claws or teeth, but judgment. Clara stepped onto the porch, one hand gripping the rail. "Please, stay back," she said, though she did not know whether she was speaking to the people or the wolves. Mayor Ellis Rourke came first, wrapped in his long black coat, his silver hair tucked beneath a wool hat. Behind him were Mr. Harlan from the bakery, Mrs. Bell from the grocery store, Pastor Green, and a dozen others Clara had known since childhood. People whose floors she had swept. People whose bread she had carried. People who had watched her grow up and still looked at her as if she were something left on their doorstep by mistake. Mayor Rourke stopped at the fence, his face pale beneath the red moonlight. "Clara Whitaker," he said, slow and cold, "what have you done?" Clara felt the question close around her throat. "I did not do anything. They came here on their own." Mr. Harlan gave a harsh laugh, but there was fear beneath it. That is what trouble always says when it comes wearing an innocent face. Only that morning, Clara had stood in his bakery with flour on her sleeves, trying not to cry while a woman from the north side of town complained that her little girl had bad dreams after seeing Clara near the display case. Mr. Harlan had not even looked at Clara when he told her to leave. He had wiped the counter where her hand had rested, as if kindness itself had become something unclean. Now he stood beyond her fence, pointing at the wolves, and his voice rose for everyone to hear. "I told you all she was wrong. I told you the red moon would answer her one day." Clara shook her head. "I have never asked the moon for anything." The words were true, but they sounded small against the crowd. She had asked for work. She had asked for a quiet life. She had asked, in the private places of her heart, for one person to look at her and see more than a rumor. The wolves shifted slightly, snow whispering beneath their paws. A smaller red wolf near the steps took a limping step forward, and Clara saw at once that its front paw was caught with a piece of old wire, likely from a broken fence line in the woods. The sight pierced through her fear. "Oh," she whispered. Without thinking, she moved down one step. Mayor Rourke raised his hand. "Do not touch it." Clara paused, torn between the warning and the soft, trembling sound the little wolf made. Every cruel voice in town seemed to press against her back, telling her what she was supposed to be. Cursed. Strange. Unwanted. But the small wolf looked up at her with bright, trusting eyes, and Clara remembered Mrs. Whitaker's gentle voice beside the stove. "When something hurting comes to your door, child, you do not ask whether helping it will make people love you. You help because that is who you are." Clara descended the porch steps. The crowd went silent. The largest wolf lowered its head again, allowing her to pass. Clara knelt in the snow before the injured wolf, her pale fingers shaking as she reached for the wire. "I am not going to hurt you," she whispered. Behind the fence, Mayor Rourke's face changed, not with fear this time, but with recognition. His eyes dropped to Clara's left wrist, where the crescent mark glowed faintly beneath her sleeve. And in that instant, Clara understood something far worse than being hated. Some of them had known exactly what she was, long before she did. The little wolf held perfectly still as Clara touched the wire, though its small body trembled beneath her hands. The metal was cold, twisted tight around the soft fur above its paw, and Clara worked slowly, easing one loop loose, then another, whispering nonsense the way Mrs. Whitaker had taught her when thunder frightened the horses in the neighbor's field. "It is all right. I have you. Just breathe." The words felt foolish in front of half the town, but the wolf's shaking softened, and the red light around Clara's wrist grew warmer, pulsing through her sleeve like a hidden lantern. Behind the fence, Mayor Rourke took one step back. Clara saw it from the corner of her eye. Not disgust. Not confusion. Fear, yes, but also guilt. The kind that lived a long time in the bones. "You knew," she said quietly, without looking away from the wolf. The mayor said nothing. Mr. Harlan muttered for someone to stop her, but no one crossed the fence. The 30 wolves had not moved, yet their stillness had become a warning stronger than any sound. Clara loosened the final loop of wire and slipped it free. The young wolf tested its paw, then pressed its forehead against her palm with such trust that Clara's throat tightened. All her life, touch had been something she offered carefully and received rarely. A brushed shoulder in the market. A coin dropped into her hand without fingers meeting hers. Mrs. Whitaker's hand on her hair in the last weeks before she passed. Now a creature the town called a monster leaned into Clara as if she had always belonged to it. The crescent mark on her wrist flared through the fabric, bright enough for everyone to see. A murmur broke through the crowd. Pastor Green whispered a prayer under his breath. Mrs. Bell covered her mouth. Mayor Rourke stared at Clara as though the past had stepped out of the grave and stood barefoot in the snow. "Tell me what you know," Clara said, her voice shaking but clear. The mayor's jaw tightened. "Go inside, Clara. Lock your door. By morning, this will be handled." Handled. The word made the largest wolf lift its head. Clara rose slowly, still holding the loose wire in her hand. "For 19 years, you let this town call me cursed. You let children throw salt when I walked by. You let people shut their windows when I passed. If you knew something about me, you owe me the truth." The red moon slid from behind a cloud, spilling copper light across the yard, and for a moment the world looked less like Raven Hollow and more like a place from a dream Clara had forgotten. The porch. The snow. The wolves bowing in a wide circle. The old road leading into the trees. Then, from inside the house, something rang. A single clear note, bright and silver, cutting through the cold. Clara turned toward the open doorway. It rang again. Not the church bell. Not the town alarm. This sound came from beneath the floorboards near Mrs. Whittaker's old rocking chair. Clara stepped back onto the porch, drawn by it. No one followed. Even the wolves waited. Inside, the house felt warmer than before, the shadows moving gently along the walls. Clara knelt beside the rocking chair and pulled at a loose board she had never noticed, though she had swept that floor 1,000 times. Beneath it lay a small wooden box wrapped in faded blue cloth. Her hands knew before her mind did. She opened it and found a silver bell no bigger than a thimble, engraved with a red moon, and a folded letter marked in Mrs. Whittaker's careful handwriting. "Clara, if they come for you, do not run." She read the words once. Then again. Outside, Mayor Rourke whispered her name like a warning. But Clara was no longer listening to him. The letter trembled in Clara's hands, the paper soft with age and worn thin along the folds, as if Mrs. Whittaker had opened it many times and never found the courage to give it away. "My dearest Clara," it began, "if you are reading this, then the wolves have come, and I am sorry I did not tell you sooner." Clara's breath caught, but she forced herself to keep reading while the silver bell rested cold in her palm. "I was not the first woman to hold you. 19 years ago, a stranger came to my door in the middle of a storm, carrying you beneath her cloak. She was pale, frightened, and noble in a way no dress could hide. She said your name was not safe, so I was to call you Clara and love you as my own until the red moon returned." Outside, the crowd murmured louder, but their voices seemed far away now, muffled behind the rush of blood in Clara's ears. She read the next line twice because it made no sense and too much sense all at once. "She told me that if 30 red wolves ever came to the house, I must not bar the door, because they would not be coming to claim a debt. They would be coming to return what was stolen." Clara lowered the letter. The little house around her blurred, every familiar thing suddenly carrying a secret. The quilt on the chair. The blue curtains Mrs. Whittaker had sewn by hand. The narrow bed where Clara had cried into her pillow after cruel school days. All of it had been love, real love, but also hiding. Her wrist burned brighter, and the silver bell began to hum against her skin. Not loudly. Not like an alarm. More like a heartbeat made of metal. Clara stood and walked back to the doorway. The 30 wolves lifted their heads in perfect unison, their golden eyes reflecting the glow around her hand. Mayor Rourke was still at the fence, but now 2 deputies had joined him, along with more townspeople carrying lanterns and old family charms. No one stepped closer. The wolves did not threaten them, yet the space between the yard and the road felt like a line no one dared cross. Clara held up the letter. "Who brought me here?" she asked. The mayor's face tightened. "Clara, you have to understand." "No," she said, and the quiet firmness of her own voice startled her. "I have spent my whole life understanding everyone else. I understood when people would not sit beside me in church. I understood when mothers pulled their children away. I understood when Mr. Harlan sent me home with no pay because one customer felt uncomfortable. Tonight, you are going to understand me. A hush fell across the yard. Even the wind seemed to lower itself. Mayor Rourke looked older beneath the red light, his shoulders bent by a memory he could no longer bury. Your mother came through this town, he said at last. She was being hunted by men who wanted the royal bloodline ended. Mrs. Whittaker hid you, and the council agreed to say you were just an abandoned baby. We thought silence would keep you safe. Clara's fingers closed around the bell. Safe, she whispered. The word tasted bitter and sad. You called it safety while I grew up believing nobody wanted me. The mayor looked away, and that small movement told her more than any confession could. Then the little wolf she had freed limped to her side and pressed gently against her leg. The silver bell rang once by itself. Across the yard, every red wolf lowered its head again, but this time Clara felt the meaning before anyone explained it. They were not asking her to follow. They were asking her to remember. Deep in the trees, beyond the reach of lantern light, a new sound moved through the forest. Hoof beats on the frozen road. Slow. Measured. Coming closer. The hoof beats reached the edge of the yard before anyone spoke again. A dark horse emerged from the tree line, its breath steaming in the cold, guided by Deputy Mason Hale with a lantern hooked to his saddle and a coil of rope across his arm. Behind him came 3 more riders from town, their faces stiff with the kind of courage people borrowed from fear. Clara felt the little wolf press closer to her leg. The largest red wolf moved half a step forward, not enough to threaten, only enough to remind everyone that Clara was no longer standing alone. Deputy Hale stopped beside Mayor Rourke and looked from the wolves to the glowing mark beneath Clara's sleeve. His voice dropped. So it is true. Mayor Rourke did not answer. Clara heard that silence like another confession. The deputy swung down from his horse and lifted both hands as if calming a crowd at a county parade. Clara, listen carefully. No one wants this night to become worse than it already is. Come with us to the town hall. We will sort this out where it is safe. Clara stared at the rope, then at the closed faces behind him. Safe had become the word they used when they wanted her quiet. Safe had meant secrets beneath floorboards. Safe had meant whispers in church pews. Safe had meant growing up with an empty place where her history should have been. I am not going anywhere with you, she said. A ripple went through the townspeople, surprise first, then anger, because they had known Clara as a girl who bowed her head and stepped aside. They did not know what to do with a Clara who stood barefoot under the red moon with 30 wolves at her back and a silver bell glowing in her palm. Mr. Harlan pushed forward, his face tight. She is bringing them closer. Can you not see that? First the mark, now the bell. By sunrise, the whole forest will be in our streets. They are not here for the town, Clara said. They came to me. And that seemed to frighten them more. Mayor Rourke took off his hat and pressed it against his chest. For a moment, Clara saw the man beneath the title, older and smaller than she remembered. Clara, your mother begged us to hide you. She said if the royal court found you before the right moon, the wrong people would use you. We made a hard choice. You made a choice for me, Clara said, and her voice cracked on the final word. The little wolf gave a soft whine. Without looking down, Clara placed her hand gently on its head. The warmth in her wrist spread into her palm, and the wolf's trembling eased. The bell rang again, though her fingers had not moved. This time, the sound rolled outward across the yard in a clear silver wave. Lantern flames bent low. The horses stilled. Snow lifted from the ground in tiny sparkling threads, circling Clara's feet as if the night itself had begun to listen. The townspeople fell silent. Clara felt something open inside her, not loud, not frightening, but ancient and patient, like a door in a house she had always lived in but never noticed. The 30 red wolves raised their heads, and for the first time, she heard them as words, not memory. Do not fear the road home. We remember the way. Clara's eyes filled, but she did not look away from the crowd. She had wanted answers from them, apologies from them, permission from them. Now she understood that none of those things could tell her who she was. Deputy Hale took one uncertain step back. Mayor Rourke whispered, "The bloodline has awakened." Clara looked toward the dark road where the hoofbeats had come from, and beyond it, deeper in the forest, another presence waited, vast and steady as winter mountains. The wolves felt it too. One by one, they turned toward the trees, not bowing this time, but welcoming. Clara held the bell against her heart, and the red light around her wrist brightened until every hidden face in the yard could see it. Whoever was coming through the forest, the wolves had not come to protect Clara from him. They had come to prepare her for him. The forest parted for him without a sound. Clara did not see the man at first. She saw the change in the wolves. 30 red heads lifted toward the tree line, 30 bodies becoming still in a different way, not watchful now, but reverent. Even the largest wolf stepped aside, making a path through the snow that led from Clara's porch to the dark edge of red pine forest. The townspeople followed that path with their eyes, and one by one, their voices faded. A black horse emerged beneath the copper moon, taller than Deputy Hale's mount by nearly a hand, its coat shining like rain-dark stone. Upon it sat a man wrapped in a long black coat lined with deep red at the collar, his posture straight, his presence so quiet that the silence around him felt commanded, not empty. He had pale skin, dark hair brushed by the wind, and eyes so silver. They seemed to hold the moonlight without reflecting it. Clara knew before anyone told her that this was not a rider from town. This was the reason the forest had been waiting. Mayor Rourke bowed so quickly his hat nearly slipped from his hands. Deputy Hale stepped back until his shoulder touched the fence. Pastor Green lowered his eyes. Mr. Harlan, who had always seemed large behind the bakery counter, suddenly looked small beneath the stranger's gaze. The man dismounted with calm precision, boots sinking into the snow, and the 30 wolves lowered themselves again, not to Clara this time, but to him. Still, his eyes did not rest on them. They stayed on Clara, not cold, not soft, but full of a recognition so deep it made her forget the air in her lungs. Clara Whitaker, he said, and her name sounded different in his voice, less like a label the town had given her and more like a key turning in an old lock. She clutched the silver bell tighter. How do you know my name? He took one step forward, then stopped when the little wolf at Clara's side leaned against her dress. Something almost gentle moved across his face. Because I have searched for you for 19 years. The words rolled through the yard with the weight of thunder heard from far away. Clara felt the porch rail behind her, though she did not remember stepping back. 19 years. The same number as her life. The same number as the red moon's return. Mayor Rourke spoke before she could. Your Majesty, we were told to keep her hidden until the sign appeared. We followed the last order of Lady Evelina. The man's silver eyes shifted to the mayor, and the temperature in the yard seemed to fall. You followed part of her order, he said. You hid the child. You did not honor her. Shame passed through the crowd like a wind no one could block. Clara stared at him. Your Majesty. The words finally found meaning. Alpha King Adrian Blackwood, ruler of a kingdom Clara had heard about only in distant rumors and winter stories, stood at the foot of her porch as if her little wooden house mattered as much as any palace. He turned back to her, and when he spoke again, his voice lowered. Your mother was Lady Evelina Rosemere, Luna of the Red Fawn Court. She trusted this town because she believed ordinary people could still be brave when power became cruel. Clara's vision blurred. My mother, she whispered. The silver bell warmed in her palm, answering the name like it had been waiting to hear it. Adrian looked at the bell, then at the mark glowing beneath Clara's sleeve. She gave her life to protect yours, he said carefully, without cruelty, without spectacle, only truth softened by sorrow. And these wolves were bound to find you when the red moon returned. Clara looked at the 30 red wolves, at their bowed heads, at the little one pressed to her side, and something inside her that had always felt abandoned shifted toward wholeness. The town had called them monsters. They had come as witnesses. The king took another step, then lowered himself to one knee in the snow before her. The yard went utterly still. "Clara Whitaker," he said, though his voice carried far beyond the porch, "you were never the curse of Raven Hollow. You were the lost heir of Red Fawn, and tonight, your mother's guardians have brought me to your door." For a moment, Clara heard nothing but the silver bell beating softly in her palm. Alpha King Adrian Blackwood remained on one knee in the snow, his black coat brushing the white ground, his silver eyes lifted to her with a respect no one in Raven Hollow had ever offered her. It should have felt impossible. A king at her porch. 30 wolves bowing in her yard. A forgotten letter in her hand, and a name she had never been allowed to know echoing through the cold. Lady Evelina Rosemere. Her mother. Clara pressed the bell against her chest as if it could hold her steady. "If I am who you say I am," she whispered, "why did no one come sooner?" The question did not accuse him alone. It moved through the yard, touching every closed curtain, every whispered insult, every year she had spent apologizing for existing. Adrian rose slowly, but he did not come closer. "Because the spell that hid you was built from your mother's final command," he said. "No royal tracker, no court seer, no wolf of mine could find you until the red moon answered your blood." He looked toward the wolves, and the largest one lifted its scarred muzzle. "They remembered what magic made us forget." Clara turned to Mayor Rourke. "Then you remembered too." The mayor's face crumpled, not dramatically, not loudly, but in the tired way of a man who had carried the wrong secret for too long. "We remembered enough," he said. "Your mother arrived before dawn with Mrs. Whitaker beside her. She begged us to keep you nameless, ordinary, unseen. We thought fear would protect you better than love." Mrs. Bell lowered her lantern. Pastor Green looked at the snow. Mr. Harlan's mouth opened, then closed again, as if every cruel word he had ever spoken had finally returned and found him speechless. Clara looked at them all, and the ache inside her did not vanish. It changed shape. She had imagined that the truth would make her anger burn clean and bright, but what rose instead was grief for the little girl who had waited on school steps, hoping someone would wave her over, and for the young woman who had smiled through humiliation because kindness was the only inheritance she knew how to keep. Adrian saw it. His voice softened. "You do not owe them forgiveness tonight. You do not owe anyone a gentle answer simply because you survived their silence." The word settled over Clara like a warm cloak. For once, she did not rush to make other people comfortable. She looked down at the little wolf beside her, now standing steady on its freed paw, and let her hand rest between its ears. The silver bell rang once more. The crescent mark on her wrist brightened, and the 30 wolves rose together. Not wild. Not restless. Waiting. Clara drew in a slow breath. Mrs. Whitaker had loved her. Her mother had protected her. The wolves had found her. And the king had crossed the dark forest not to take her away, but to offer her the truth. Mayor Rourke bowed his head. "Clara, I am sorry." The words came late, but they came. Clara held his gaze across the fence. "I believe you are sorry," she said. "But sorrow does not give me back 19 years. No one argued. Even the wind seemed to honor the sentence. Adrian removed the dark cloak from his shoulders and offered it to her, not placing it on her, not claiming the choice, only holding it out with both hands. "Red Fawn is your mother's home," he said. "If you choose to see it, I will take you there. If you choose to stay here tonight, the wolves and I will guard your door until sunrise." Clara looked at the small house behind her, with its patched roof and warm stove and hidden floorboard. Then she looked toward the forest road, where the trees opened beneath the red moon like a path waiting for her first step. For the first time in her life, leaving did not feel like being abandoned. It felt like being called home. Clara reached for the cloak with both hands. The fabric was heavier than it looked, warm from the king's shoulders, lined in deep red that shimmered beneath the moonlight like the inside of a rose. Adrian did not move until she drew it around herself by choice. Only then did the largest wolf step forward and lower its head beside the porch, offering its broad back like a bridge between the girl she had been and the road she had never been allowed to see. Clara looked once more at the house behind her. The little front room still held Mrs. Whittaker's rocking chair, the cracked mug of tea, the quilt folded over the armrest, and the loose floorboard that had guarded the truth longer than some people had guarded her heart. She loved that house. She always would. But love was not the same as a cage, and memory was not the same as home. She tucked Mrs. Whittaker's letter into the pocket of the cloak and held the silver bell against her palm. "I will come back for her things," she said quietly. Adrian nodded as if the promise mattered. "They will be protected." Mayor Rourke stepped aside from the fence, and one by one, the townspeople made room. Not with cheering, not with sudden affection, but with a silence heavy enough to be understood. Clara walked through the yard, the little wolf at her side, the other red wolves forming a calm circle around her. No one called her cursed. No one told her to lower her eyes. When she passed Mr. Harlan, he looked down at his flour-stained hands, and Clara remembered every morning she had stood behind his bakery counter before sunrise, hoping hard work could earn the kindness birth had not given her. She did not stop. Some doors in a life closed without needing to slam. At the road, Adrian offered his hand to steady her as she stepped onto the forest path. Clara hesitated for only a second before taking it. His grip was firm, careful, and respectful, the hand of someone who understood that trust was not something a crown could command. The red moon hung above them, huge and watchful, painting the snow in copper light. Behind Clara, Raven Hollow looked smaller than it ever had, a cluster of roofs and fears tucked beneath the hill. Ahead, Red Pine Forest opened like a dark cathedral, its branches arching over the road, its shadows no longer feeling empty. The wolves moved first, silent and certain. The largest walked at Clara's left. The little one stayed at her right. Adrian walked beside her, not ahead, not behind. After a while, the church bell stopped ringing. The quiet that followed was not loneliness. It was peace. Clara touched the crescent mark on her wrist and felt it glow beneath her fingertips, steady as a pulse. "What happens when we reach Red Fawn?" she asked. Adrian looked toward the trees, where dawn had begun to pale the farthest edge of the sky. "You will meet the people who have been waiting to remember you," he said. "And after that?" Clara asked. He turned to her then, silver eyes gentle beneath all that power. "After that, Clara, you decide who you become." The words settled deep inside her, deeper than fear, deeper than the years of shame. She had been hidden, but not forgotten. Hurt, but not broken. Raised in a town that mistook gentleness for weakness, only to discover that the wolves had crossed miles of frozen forest for the sound of her heartbeat. As the first light of morning touched the red moon and softened it to gold, Clara Whittaker walked into the trees with 30 guardians beside her and a king at her shoulder. And for the first time since she had been found as a baby on a storm-soaked road, she was not being carried away from danger. She was walking toward her name.